Welcome to ERGT Radio. I'm Mike, your host. Thanks for joining us. Well, here at ERGT Radio, we have set a new record for viewership and shares of our last episode broadcasted. That episode featured our interview with Officer Floyd. And we'd like to thank Officer Floyd once again for joining us on the program. He gave us a lot of insight onto the Second Amendment, the Castle Doctrine, and how law enforcement views the Second Amendment and how they deal with certain situations. So it's a lot of information, and if you hadn't had a chance to watch that episode or listen to it, it's right there here on the page. It should be posted below this episode. So if you hadn't had a chance to listen to it, I would definitely encourage you to do so. It's got a lot of good information in it. Now, I'd like to talk about a few different things on this broadcast. First off, I'd like to send our condolences and our heartfelt sympathies out to the families of those who died in Flight 370. There's at least one U.S. citizen on board that they've identified, and everyone is believed dead at this point in time. On another note, in New York, a pastor gave a AR-15 in his Sunday morning, and it's kind of unusual, especially being in the state of New York not known for its pro-gun laws. The pastor decided to give away an AR-15 with some mags. His reasoning for this was very interesting. He wanted to support all the members of his congregation and those that were being persecuted by the anti-gun crowd, which in New York is pretty much the government and all the other liberals. So to support them, he was doing a gun giveaway. Now, I support him in that action. The thing I don't support him in is the fact that he did it at church. Now, there could have been a lot of other venues he could have done it at. Church, I believe, and I know not everyone that listens to the broadcast goes to church, but a church should be a place of worship. You know, whether you go to a Muslim mosque, whether you go to Pentecostal church, Methodist, Catholic, Baptist, wherever you go, church is about worship. If you've actually read the Bible, which if you read in the New Testament, Jesus actually chased money changers, and those that did business in the house of God chased them out. Now, is this similar to that? You could look at it that way. You could not look at it that way. But I don't believe that that was the most appropriate place the pastor could have done it. Also talking about guns, in Connecticut there is this massive act of civil disobedience against the government. The reason they're fighting back against the government, protesting, is the government is pretty much trying to take their Second Amendment rights away. Flat out, period. And the citizens of Connecticut have decided to say, no, we are not going to follow your laws that violate our constitutional rights. Period. So, they have read their Second Amendment. They know what it says. The right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, period. Not, well, just a little bit, or, well, you can't have magazines of a certain size, or you can't have a muzzle brake and a carrying handle, or a collapsible buttstock, or a pistol grip. The Constitution doesn't mention any of that. It just says, flat up, it shall not be infringed. So, I support those in Connecticut that are standing up for their rights that they are guaranteed by the Constitution. On another note, speaking of politics and big government, we're going to switch scenes over to Ukraine. Now, there's been a lot of talk about it in the news lately. And somebody made the comparison, a little after I did, of Ukraine being similar to the United States and what goes on here. In the United States, you have pretty much two basic schools of thought. Whether you're Republican, Democrat, doesn't matter. You have the pro-freedom side, those who believe that you should have more freedom, and those that want more power, more control. We usually classify those as Republican and Democrats. And if you're middle of the road, you're an independent. That is not very accurate. You have liberal Republicans and conservative Republicans. So usually we would classify that as either being conservative or liberal. Now, in Ukraine, they have their two sides. They have the pro-Russian side, which you would classify pretty much as liberal. They believe in bigger government, more control, and they are corrupt as all get out. They were in power for many years. Now, you have the other side, the pro-Western side. They want to be free. They want the freedoms that the West has. I mean, let's face it, they want the freedoms that we have right here in America. That is what they want. So, you have these two schools of thought, and they're kind of like the conservatives over there in Ukraine. Well, the European Union was going to do a $10 billion bailout of Ukraine. Well, the powers that be in Ukraine were pro-Russian at the time. So they looked up to their Russian neighbors and said, hey, the European Union is offering us this. Well, we don't want to do that because that's pro-West. So how about we do pro-Russian side and you help us? So the Russians agreed. Well, that money didn't go to the people of Ukraine. That went to pad the pockets of the government. Does that sound familiar to the United States? Yes, it does. So the people had had enough, and they started, I wouldn't say rioting, they were protesting. They were demonstrating, standing up for what they believed in, and against the government that was violating their rights, the injustice. That's what they were fighting against. Now, the police had gotten tired of all the demonstrations and everything, so they finally started opening fire on the protesters. And I watched several movie clips, and it was kind of disturbing. Watching Ukrainians try to hide, defend themselves with aluminum shields. Bullets pass right through it. Saw a guy get hit, screaming out for help. This was the law enforcement, which was under the control of the pro-Russian side. So the Ukrainians, after this, you could see the importance of the Second Amendment, why it's there. And they want a Second Amendment in their country. They're asking for it. Why? Because they don't want something like that to happen to them again. So why do we want it? We want it for the same reason, so that doesn't happen to us. So for those in Connecticut, I support you. As long as we have that right, it's a different story. If the Ukrainians are armed, the police can't open up fire. They wouldn't dare, because they know, okay, yeah, we may take out a few demonstrators, but now it's an all-out war, and the pro-Russians would get whooped. Plain and simple. They would just get whooped. Well, they protested, and eventually they overpowered the pro-Russian side, and pretty much the president fled. Where did he go? He went to Russia, seeking asylum. There haven't been any confirmed reports that I have read of his exact location, but you know he's not far from a very cozy environment. The Russians, they looked at Ukraine. Ukraine is really close to their border. Now, if Ukraine went conservative / pro-West, that would allow, let's say, the United States, maybe build a base there, maybe get closer. Well, that doesn't sit well with the Russians. They like their buffer zone. They like a nice cushion of unstable countries that they can manipulate around them so they don't have any problems. So they decided to take action. Now, if you remember, several years back during the Beijing Olympics, something similar happened around that time. Russia invaded the country of Georgia. Georgia had been asking to get into NATO. They kept getting blocked. And Russia, trying to, quote, quell the resistance, invaded and whooped the Georgians. The Georgians didn't have a chance. Russia has a powerful military. Well, the Russians eventually withdrew. Well, I warned to keep an eye on Russia because this happened at the last Olympics. Well, guess what happened? It did. And the Russians have become involved in this incident in Ukraine. The Russians have been conducting exercises, huge military exercises, the biggest exercises that they have ever done, right on the border of Ukraine. Why? One, it's a show of force. Two, the eyes of the world are now watching Ukraine. It's kind of nice when everyone's watching in your general direction to flex your muscles, so they notice. But The Russians, I wouldn't say flat out invaded Crimea, but you could take that from a point of view, because they have pretty much occupied Crimea. And their reason for this was that they're trying to protect the Russians that were there. If you think back in history, Hitler came up with a similar excuse prior to invading, I believe it was Austria-Hungary, to protect the German citizens. Well, we all know Hitler didn't stop there. Hitler continued and continued and continued until there was World War II. Am I saying Russia is going to start World War III? Not necessarily. But I am saying that it is a distinct possibility. Everyone's watching what happens in Russia, and Crimea, being pretty much dominated by the liberal side, wants to go Russian. Well, Ukraine said, this is our country, this is our land, no, you can't have it, so you need to move back to your country, take your tanks, your aircraft, your helicopters, you can take everything, take it back and go home. Because this is our country. You're not allowed to annex it. I mean, think of it from the United States perspective. Okay. Canada is not known for being ultra-conservative. So, my apologies to my Canadian friends. But let's just say Canada was doing that to us. And we had a disagreement, and we were going against pro-Canadians in New England. Well, Canada decides to annex everything from, let's say, Maryland up. Would you be bothered by that? Yeah, you'd be bothered by that. No, this is the United States. You can't have it. It's ours. And that's how the Ukrainians feel. It's their country. It's none of Russia's business what goes on in their country. Just like in our country, it's none of Canada's business how we run our policies. It's none of Mexico's business how we run our policies. So I definitely can empathize with the Ukrainians and them wanting Russia out. So it is a very interesting situation that's going on over there. There hasn't been all-out war declared, but a lot depends on how things go. Now that the pro-Russian side or liberal side has been kicked out, it can go a lot of different ways. I am hoping a peaceful solution can be found that doesn't involve sacrifice by those who are free. And what I mean by that, a lot of people like to give up freedoms, to give up things in order to keep the peace. If somebody said you couldn't have red cars, only revolutionists use them. Well, you don't want any incidents if everyone hates red cars, so you don't get a red one, you get a blue one. Because you want to keep the peace. You don't want to start things. Walking in a gang zone, wearing the colors or the dress of the opposite gang that they're at war with. You don't want that confrontation, even if you have nothing to do with either gang. People don't like the confrontation, so they will just go along with things. I'm hoping Ukrainians and their new government stand strong and keep the no. No, Russia, you cannot have Crimea. It is our country. And I hope they don't waver. And I hope the president stands firm on what he says he's going to do. Now, you can say a lot about our international policy. I think most of our international policy is a joke. We invade countries, we occupy countries for years, we put men and women in harm's way for no good reason or good positive gain or objective. We don't take care of our own country and our spending, but we want to send billions of dollars to Ukraine in aid. I'm not saying don't aid Ukraine. But we send millions of dollars here, billions of dollars there. We wanted to send weapons to Syria for the rebels, who were actually partly run by Al-Qaeda, which we were fighting in other countries. Whatever sense that makes. Our international policy has been a joke under this administration. They hand out ambassadorial ships like they're candy. Hey, you look cool. Hey, you help my campaign. Here, you want a free trip to Chile? You can have a free trip to Chile, and you can be our ambassador there. Go have fun. Here's a lot more money than anybody else is paid, or should be paid. And here you go, to sit there and represent us. What qualifications do you have? Oh, that doesn't matter. You gave to my campaign. Yeah, international policy from the United States is a joke. But the president has had a few discussions with the Russian Prime Minister, Putin. Pretty much, they've agreed to keep talking. But Russia doesn't want to back down. And the United States has been sending, I wouldn't say military into Ukraine, but we are preparing for pretty much any scenario that comes out of this. We want to be prepared, which being prepared, there's nothing wrong with. I'm all about being prepared for most logical scenarios. Now, I'm not saying, I'm all about storing up 3 years' food supply in my basement, but you need to be prepared for most contingencies, and that's what we are doing with our military. However, if you look at another side of us, we're cutting our military down to the bone. We've spread them all over the world, and we want to send more to possibly help the Ukrainians, which I don't agree with. Not helping Ukraine, but with the downsizing of our military and still spreading them all over the world, you're losing quality, you're losing your quantity, and technology is no substitute for people on the ground. We have learned this. The best technology in the world, how long did it take to find bin Laden? It wasn't something quick. It wasn't boom, yeah, we got him, he's gone. Because we have this great technology, we can track everybody. Yeah, not so much. Technology doesn't rule the world. And we rely on technology a little too much. We know more about our allies' policy than we do our enemies. We spy on our enemies. No, we spy on our friends. And we give money to enemy countries. Does that make sense? No, it doesn't. So for the thing going on in Ukraine, I don't know what's going to happen. People predict a lot of different things, but as I said, I'm hoping for a positive solution to come out of this that doesn't involve all-out war. But I don't want it to come at the cost of the Ukrainians giving up their land. Because if you remember, prior to World War II, that is exactly what we did. After World War I, if you're familiar with history, Germany didn't really start World War I. Germany went in with Austria-Hungary at the time. And the Central Powers at the time pretty much were kicking butt and taking names. Well, at the end of the war, when the Central Powers lost, we punished Germany to death. We took their most economical producing areas, their best industrial areas, agriculture areas, and said, no, you can't have those. Oh, and by the way, you now owe everyone war restitution. Everybody. And they saddled it all on Germany. Even one of the great generals said this thing is only going to last about 20 years. The German people hated us for that. Can you blame them? That is part of what contributed to World War II. And Hitler started moving from Germany, started taking back stuff. Well, his excuse is, we need this. We need some breathing room. Or we want to protect the German citizens in this country, so we're going to occupy it. Well, the allies of World War I were like, well, we don't want another world war. We don't want to get involved in all this, so we'll let you have what you want. And I'm hoping we do not make the same mistake with Russia this time around. Because if you start handing away countries to keep them quiet, they're just going to keep pushing further and further and further until, like in World War II, we drew the line at Poland. Germany made a deal with Russia. Hey, you help us, you get half. Russia's like, yeah, we'll take half. So that's what started World War II. After the invasion, I think it was September 1st. 2 days later, September 3rd, war was declared. And Germany wiped out Europe, minus Great Britain, pretty easily. Now, I'm not saying Russia is going to conquer the world or attempt to. But you start setting bad precedents when you start appeasing your enemies. You need to stand up to your enemies. For what Ukraine's doing, they have a lot of respect from me. Standing up for your freedoms is not easy. We try to do that here on ERTT Radio. I don't have the government pounding at my door because I'm doing a radio program. I'm not being hauled off to jail or at personal risk because I'm standing up against tyranny. But in Ukraine, it was a different story. Most of them remember what happened under the Soviet Union. Do the letters KGB bring up any memories for anybody? If you think World War II, you got the Gestapo, secret police. So they don't want that. They want to be free like we do. So flipping it back around to us here in the United States, it's something to watch for. You can see Ukraine. They're not the wealthiest nation on earth by any means. But if you look at Ukraine, you can see a lot of the similarities. Pro-West, conservatives. Pro-Russian, the liberals. I'm not saying all pro-Russians are liberals, but you see those similarities in how they're played out in our country. Is the government corrupt in our country? Okay, I hope nobody said no, because I didn't hear any no's, because I'd be dying laughing right now, because obviously it's not true. Our government is so corrupt it's unbelievable. More people pad their pockets. The president goes on another vacation. Who's paying for that? We are. Where's my vacation to? Hawaii, Alaska. Oh wait, I live in Alaska. Where's my vacation to Florida? We'll go to Florida. It's nice and warm now. Nope, no vacation? Well, then you shouldn't have one either. You should pay for it out of your own pocket, not using the taxpayer's dime for it. Is there corruption? Yes. Is there injustice? Yes, there is injustice, and a lot of it. Is our government trying to take over more and more? Obamacare, hello. That's like 1/6 of our economy. The government is trying to take more and more and more. So at what point are we pushed to the Ukrainian level? I don't know, but look at Connecticut. A lot's going to come down to who pushes who when. I'm not an advocate of having a huge revolution here in the United States. Why? Because I don't think things will improve. For one, it could drag out for years. Two, it shows weakness to the entire world. Not like we don't show weakness as it is with a $15 trillion plus deficit, and then we hand out billions of dollars to people who don't need it. Oh, well, they may need it or claim they need it, but where does that money go? Not to the people. So at what point are we pushed to for? Where does it stop? Where is our line in the sand? One of the things that I mentioned on the radio program is that the government wanted to help the news media and put government liaisons to help promote the government. Make sure the government facts were getting out the way they should be. I'm not a fan of the news media. Okay, most of you know it's part of the reason I'm doing the radio program. But the news media said, you ain't sticking your political assassins into our news media telling us what we can and can't do. Well, no, they're supposed to observe and, point things out. No. We don't need political officers. Okay, that belongs in the movie for Hunt for Red October. You can keep your political officer stuff. We don't need that. We have freedom of the press. Government stays out, period. So the media said no, there is a outcry of foul, and then the usual retractions. Oh, well, we didn't mean to do that, blah, blah, blah. They're testing us. They're testing us to see how far they can push before we push back. And that is how almost every major policy goes with the government these days. The president and his executive orders. He pushes, and he wants to see how bad the pushback is. If there is no pushback, okay, well, I got away with that. Let's see if I can go here. Or let's see if I can go there. How far can I go before everyone blows the whistle of, hey, yeah, you went way out of bounds, buddy. You can't do that. So, what is our limit? What is your limit? For those of you listening here to the program, what is your limit? How far will you let the government trample on your rights before you do something to stop it? I'm trying to do something to stop it right now. I'm trying to tell all of you what's going on so you know what you need to do, where they are in reference to your line, whatever your line is. Is your line, well, when they try to take our freedom of speech, that's when I'll say something. Or maybe when they decide to take our right to a free trial, innocent until proven guilty, when they take that, that's when I'll say something. When they say I can't drive anymore and I can't own a car, that's when I'll say something. When I can't surf the internet and go to whatever website I want, good or bad, that's when I'll say something. Oh, buddy, we have a problem if that's what you're waiting for. The only way they could get away with it is if they already know you can't do anything about it. That is why we have the Second Amendment. You have guns for defense, okay, hunting, practice shooting, just for fun. Those are all good reasons to have guns. But they are for defense, home defense, personal defense. If you can't defend yourself, what do you become? A victim. Either you are able to defend yourself or you can't. Well, what's the difference between a free man and a slave? A free man still has his choices. Okay, he may not be the most secure man in the world. The safest, most secure person is a slave. Why? Well, he knows he's owned by so-and-so and does what he's told. And it's a protected interest for the owner. I don't agree with slavery at all, on any level. I believe the line for your freedoms needs to be drawn at the Second Amendment. Because once you lose your right to defend your rights, defend your home, defend your family, defend your property, when you lose those rights, everything else will come shortly thereafter. You doubt me? Watch history. Hitler did it. How did they do it? They registered the guns first. What did California do? Register the guns first. Oh, we'll never take them away. A few years later, Hitler took all the guns away for security. People went along with it. What did they do in California after all the guns were registered? They took them away. What did they try to do in Connecticut? Take them away. There's a progression here. If you pay attention to history and learn from it, you won't make the same mistakes that they have in the past. And as I said in one of my news articles, those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it, and repeat it and repeat it. But if you don't learn from history correctly, you're just doomed, because the lessons are there. You need to look and you need to see the Second Amendment keeps you free. The right to keep and bear arms keeps you free. The Ukrainians know this. They wanted to defend their freedoms. Lives were lost because they didn't have the ability to do it, and they became easy targets for those who had the weapons, the police, the government. So, next time one of your friends bashes the Second Amendment, or somebody you know in your family says, oh, well, you don't need guns, point them out in history. What happened? Whether you believe guns have a place in a society, or whether that they guarantee your freedoms, look at every country that when they took the guns away, what followed? First went the guns, then went this freedom, that freedom, that freedom, and that freedom, until there was nothing left. Will that happen in this country? When we lose our right to keep and bear arms, that is what's going to happen. Well, that's all we have time here, folks. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us here on this episode. Next week, we're going to have another guest on the program, and he is a former Marine. We're going to be talking about some different topics. So, make sure you stay tuned to the program. Make sure you catch that episode. If you have any questions for my special guest for next week, you can send me an email at miked@ert2radio.com. And as always, live free and die free.